Back on the Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell on your afternoon drive. Joining us now on our hotline.
He's
not here.
We had to make sure these mics worked
okay.
first. We weren't sure these mics were going to work.
Oh, okay. Well, Mike's ready to go. So you can
That
call.
mic's working.
That mic's
These
working.
mics, we had a little snafu. Is it too cold? Does power go out when it gets too cold?
No, not really. I think the only thing you got to worry about is your pipes freezing.
Right. Sure, it's not a flame situation, like a flame without.
Do we need somebody to
I don't know how this place
warm up
is powered.
warm up the wires right here?
It's the old
Here's
town,
the thing.
man.
It's cold in here today. Some days it's 100. Some days it's like 50.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
I usually go by it's going to be different in here because my office, when it's 80 in my office, it's going to be 50 in here.
I imagine it like the movie The Burbs or maybe the Titanic. Like there's a group of men that are just shoveling coal in the basement of the Candy Cane building to keep the power
us warm?
Right, to keep the power going on. It's just like 24/7. It's just down there. It's like hell. You just got guys shoveling coal in there, and it's,
Is Mike there?
It's a cold day today.
Oh, no Mike. Okay. Well, anyway, I was going to tell you what he wrote. It's really cool. He said his Bengals beat. Anytime you don't make the playoffs, it's a failure.
Yeah.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree. Because I said that when I saw Micah Parsons. You're wasting the prime of some of these great players. And I just think, let's just say Joe Burrow won MVP. Does he care? I don't think he does. I think that guy wants to win a Super Bowl. He wants to win a championship. That's what you're there for. When you don't win championships or don't even make the playoffs, you got to feel like, man, that was 18 weeks of hell, and we got nothing to show for it.
Well, when I think of the Cincinnati Bengals this year, I think of what you always say with baseball season. Don't win the games in April so you don't have to win them in September.
Yep.
And they lost so many games at the beginning of the season like they've done the last 2 or 3
started
years.
1-4.
And this year was no injury excuse. Like Burrow was ready to go, but yeah, the 1-4 slow start
killed him.
It came back to burn him in the end. And the 5-win run that they had at the end of the season, yes, it's impressive, but again, you're talking about your Cowboys, Titans, Browns. The Broncos win was a good win. That was a great game. At Steelers, didn't look like they were playing. Like those last 5 wins, a little bit suspect, and especially the way they started it out. The Bengals basically did this to themselves. Like you can yell at the Kansas City Chiefs for not playing anybody and starting Carson Wentz yesterday, but win a couple more games in the beginning of the season, you don't even have this conversation.
Listen, you're number one in passing in all the NFL. Your quarterback, set career highs for touchdowns and all that and yards and all that kind of stuff.
Chase,
but this is why Lou Anarumo got fired. You were 25th in statistics defensively. But listen, they also had a lot of injuries. So here's the category that really annoys me. They were 30th in rushing. You allowed Joe Mixon to go free agent and go to the Texans. And so, it going back to Saquon Barkley or Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry, a lot of these teams became almost one-dimensional because you had to rely so much on the quarterback. And that was the Cincinnati Bengals. And it probably took them a period of time saying, our quarterback's coming off injury. We don't have a great running game. They start 1-4. We bring in Mike Petraglia, who covers the Cincinnati Bengals and that division with the Ravens and the Steelers, et cetera, from CLNS Media. And Mike, we're just kind of going over, you're firing your defensive coordinator when I don't think a lot of this was really his fault that they got off to such a slow start this season.
No, I agree with that in part, Dibbs. Certainly the defense did not perform. And as well as anybody that in the business of professional sports, it's not whether or not the coach was to fault or to blame for the performance. It's who ultimately takes accountability and responsibility. And in this particular case, Lou Anarumo had to take accountability for a roster that was not well suited to stop the run and get any pressure on the quarterback. And as a result, they gave up huge plays left and right. They just didn't have enough pressure on the edges. And, it took Lou Anarumo half the season to figure out how to position these players in the right spots to get, them to play better. And that's what I think really ultimately cost him his job, is that it took so long. And in, starting 0-3 and getting off to a 4-8 start, the Bengals could never recover. And I think that's essentially what it came down to. But if you're asking me, was Lou Anarumo to blame for his roster being nowhere good enough on the defensive side? Of course not.
How about the head guy, Zach Taylor?
I have no problem with Zach. I think he's an offensive-minded coach. I think he's one of the brightest young coaches in the National Football League. Again, this is personnel, guys. And I can tell you, I have pretty intimate knowledge of the way the Bengals have worked over 50 years. The Bengals have the smallest scouting department in the National Football League. Mike Brown has the ultimate say. Katie Blackburn and Troy Blackburn have the purse strings, and Duke Tobin is the director of player personnel. To me, the ultimate responsibility falls on them. And I think in Zach Taylor, they have a pretty dynamic offensive quarterback. And most importantly, guys, Joe Burrow loves Zach Taylor, and he loves the fact that Zach Taylor understands how Joe Burrow wants to play the game. And I think when you have a quarterback as gifted as Joe Burrow is, and I am of the belief, and this sounds biased, but I am of the belief he is the best all-around quarterback in the National Football League. When you have a guy that good, you want to keep him happy. So two things. Give him a head coach he can work with on a day-to-day basis, and give him weapons like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Now, it's up to the front office to find a way, and this was addressed today in the wrap-up Zoom call we had with Zach Taylor. You've got to find a way to extend Jamar Chase and re-sign T. Higgins. I think it's that simple.
Well, and I talked, and going back 8 weeks, maybe more, we've talked about Joe Mixon and him getting away. He ran for over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns for the Texans in 14 games. You missed that a lot. You were 30th in rushing yards on offense. So it was, if you didn't have Joe Burrow and you didn't have Superman on your team, you'd be in a lot more trouble than a 9-8 record. And let's get to those guys. Do they have the money to sign Chase and Higgins?
Short answer is yes, they do. They just have to make up their mind that they're going to have to get creative on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to have to draft better. And a lot of teams, the Detroit Lions, had to make up that mind, and it was pointed out on the broadcast by Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth. They had to rebuild their entire secondary last year coming into this year, and they're 15-2. So it can be done. You have to make up your mind, if you're the Bengals, that your best players are your best players and they need to be paid accordingly. And Joe Burrow's words that are ringing throughout the building and ringing throughout the city of Cincinnati are, from the last couple of weeks, you can't make a business of letting your best players walk out the door. And that is obviously a message that you can't let T. Higgins get away, and you sure as heck can't let Jamar Chase walk out the door. I don't think they're going to let Jamar Chase go, but they may say, hey, this is what we have for you, T, and if you can get better, best of luck to you. Well, that kind of screws over Burrow and the rest of the team, and it certainly will tick off the fans here in Cincinnati. And the reason for that is not just that it's a business decision, but you're letting a 25, soon-to-be 26-year-old top of his game receiver leave for greener pastures. And it is obvious to me and to others that T. Higgins made the change from David Mulugeta, his former agent, to Rocky Arsenault, the same agent as Jamar Chase. That was a signal, a tea leaf, if you will, that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get a deal done. And if working with Rocky is going to be easier, then make me an offer, make Rocky an offer, and we'll go forward. But again, it's up to the front office to show a willingness to do that.
Bengals just missing the 7th seed in the AFC. It now belongs to the Broncos. They will be taking on the Bills. That would have been one heck of a game. Still going to be a great game between the Broncos and the Bills. But the AFC North matchup will be the Ravens hosting the Steelers. Some implications on this one, my man. Like if Steelers lose, what does that mean for Russ? What does that mean for Tomlin? If Ravens lose, what does that mean for Lamar and playoffs and his legacy? Talk about this game, this matchup. Like what's on the line here, Ravens versus Steelers, besides the team moving on in the playoffs?
I think there's a lot more at stake for Lamar Jackson. Look, Mike Tomlin is in like stone with the Rooneys and in Pittsburgh. That's just the way it is. I mean, he hasn't had a lot of success since winning that Super Bowl when they beat, I believe it was the Arizona Cardinals.
Right.
In Ben Roethlisberger's second Super Bowl victory. He hasn't had a lot of success, but they did get back, I believe, 2 years later and lost to the Green Bay Packers. There's nothing's going to happen with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. As for Russell Wilson, I'm not as sure there. I'm not there on boots on the ground, but I think they'll probably go forward with Russell Wilson again. I don't think they're going Justin Fields. At least that's not the impression I get from afar. And no, there was no buzz about that when I was there over the weekend in Pittsburgh. In terms of the Baltimore Ravens, you can't go 12 wins again with an MVP quarterback and then lose in the first round. That cannot happen if you're John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. Will any jobs be lost if they lose? Probably not, because what are you going to do? I mean, you're not going to. I don't think you're going to fire John Harbaugh. I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
And you're sure as heck not going to, let go of Lamar Jackson. But maybe the people around him, maybe that's what happens if they lose in the first round. You take a look at the way the offense is being run, the way they use Lamar Jackson. Certainly there's a possibility that, they would, mix things up again. But I can't imagine, guys. They have Derrick Henry, who in other seasons would also be in the MVP conversation. They have Zay Flowers, who is dinged up going into this playoff game. They have Isaiah Likely, who has been sensational this year. They still have Mark Andrews. They have Mike Williams. I mean, they're loaded. What are you going to do if you're the Ravens and you lose on a fluke play? I don't think you're going to blow up that roster. I just don't.
Talking to Mike Petraglia from CLNS Media before he was in Cincinnati. He was in Boston, and he was covering New England Patriots for 20 years. Their great run before, Mayo gets in there. So let's talk about that. You have to follow in the footsteps of Bill Belichick. Gerard Mayo comes in there, and he gets fired after 1 year. I saw Rob Gronkowski go ballistic on Fox yesterday. Your thoughts on how quickly they've turned the page on Mayo after 1 year?
I was not surprised by them moving on from Mayo after 1 year. Again, somewhat like Lou Anarumo here in Cincinnati, he's not to blame for the Patriots having just 4 wins. But when most of your roster regresses, and save the quarterback Drake May, who I think looked very good at times this year as a rookie quarterback in the NFL, is Gerard Mayo the guy to take your program to the next level? And from the outside and talking to people around the organization, he was struggling to get a grip on that. Well, he's a first-year head coach, and I think it's unrealistic to put a first-year head coach in that situation with that incredibly volatile roster situation and expect him to have success, not just this year, but in the coming years, the next 2 to 3 years down the road. I think a guy like Mike Vrabel could come in and probably establish a culture much quicker than Gerard Mayo did. And certainly I think Mike Vrabel has a relationship with the Kraft family, certainly Jonathan Kraft, and I think they feel like they can speed up the progress of developing that roster more quickly with a guy like Mike Vrabel than Gerard Mayo.
In your years of covering the NFL and all the games and all the teams, have you ever known of a situation where ownership has told a coaching staff to lose because it would help draft or something else otherwise?
Well, I mean, read between the lines. Sure, I've been around organizations in other sports where that's happened, but I mean, with the Patriots, obviously, I was never exposed to that because that never came up. But
until yesterday.
Until yesterday. Just talking with people around the team, the Patriots going from 1 to 4 overall in the draft order is a big deal. And I don't know as a head coach how you tell your guys to not go out and play. That's a tough one for me. Maybe you sit guys more quickly and more rapidly to make sure you're not putting out the most competitive team. And maybe the Crafts were like, why are you putting out all of these starters, or why are you putting out regular players to try and make plays in this game? I mean, are you going to blame Joe Milton because in his first NFL game he completed his first 11 passes?
You look great.
You look great.
I mean,
it's awesome.
What are you supposed to do in that situation? I don't know. I don't think in the end could that have been a factor. Sure, I'm not sitting here and telling you I know information that I don't. I would be pretty stunned. I think personally, guys, if you're asking me if this has been in the works for a while based on my conversations and my texting with people in and around the Patriots organization, yeah, I think they've been thinking about it for a while.
Mike, you are the best, my friend. Thank you so much for basically wrapping that up, especially with the Bengals and stuff. And as the playoffs go on, we'll certainly have you back on, talk some more NFL, my friend.
That sounds good, gentlemen. I appreciate it. And we are snowbound here in Cincinnati, so I hope where you are in Hartford, it's a little warmer.
How much you get in Ohio?
We got about a foot.
Whoa!
Yeah, they did.
That might be
Southern
the most
Ohio,
I've ever
too.
heard.
Like,
Really?
Northern Ohio is better than Southern
Yeah, we
Ohio.
really did. That's why I'm
be careful.
snowbound. And when I hang up this phone, guess where I'm going?
Get a
Out to the
snowblower
driveway.
or shovel
Out
your
to the
thing?
end- Yeah, exactly. Out to
crazy.
the end of the driveway
Be safe.
and my sidewalk to do some shoveling. So wish me luck.
Well, I
Yes,
know when I
please.
lived there, man, they didn't even have like snowplows.
Oh,
What-
it's bad. The roads, Dibs, the roads are horrific. I live on a main artery called Kenwood Road. I'm sure you're aware of it.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yep.
And it is not plowed. And I find that I'm aghast. That is a word. I'm aghast
Yeah.
at the fact that my car is sliding on a main artery about 3 to 4 hours after the storm has passed.
Nope. I remember when I lived there that people just on the highway just parked their cars on 71 and
Yeah.
75. We're like, screw it.
Forget
I'll
about
walk
it.
home.
Yep.
I'll come back for it tomorrow.
Well, that happened with 3 tractor trailers this morning, by the way, in the middle of the
in the middle of the road, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it happened.
Oh, my God.
I love the word,
All
though.
right, be
aghast.
careful out there,
Yeah, be
Trags.
careful.
Gosh, man.
Yeah, they don't know what to do with snow.
Jeez,
No.
Louise. All right.
All right.
All right.
Mike Petraglia,
Be
you are the
good.
best, Trags.
Thanks,
Be well,
Mike.
my friend.
Bye.
You too.
Yep.
Take care.
All right. When we come back, we'll do Dibbles and Bits.